They say silence is golden, but in my line of work, silence usually means someone has stopped breathing. The pediatric ward was quiet tonight, save for the drumming of the rain against the Seoul skyline. I was just locking the supply cabinet when the double doors burst open, bringing the storm inside. Rain lashed against the pristine linoleum, tracking mud and chaos into my sanctuary. I spun around, my hand instinctively dropping to the heavy set of keys in my pocket, a makeshift brass knuckle I hadn't needed in 3 years. A phalanx of men in black suits flooded the hallway. They weren't hospital security. They moved like oil, slick, unified, and dangerous. In the center of the formation strode a man who looked like he had been carved out of cold marble and expensive whiskey. He was soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes were frantic. In his arms, he clutched a small girl as if she were the last fragile thing on earth. "Help her," he roared. His voice was a deep baritone that commanded obedience, the kind of voice that toppled governments or ordered executions. "She's bleeding." I didn't flinch at the shouting. I'd heard louder screams over the roar of mortar fire in places that didn't exist on tourist maps. I stepped forward, raising my hands in a gesture of calm authority. "Bring her here," I ordered, pointing to the nearest examination table. "Clear the room. Now." The man hesitated, his sharp eyes assessing me in a microsecond, but the red stain spreading on the girl's white dress made his decision for him. He laid her down. "Get out," I told the wall of bodyguards. "You're crowding her. She needs air, not testosterone." To my surprise, the man snapped his fingers, and his guards retreated to the perimeter, their backs to the walls, hands hovering near their lapels. I focused on the child. She couldn't have been more than 5. She had her father's dark, intense eyes, but hers were wide with shock. A jagged cut ran down her shin, nasty, likely from a fall onto concrete or glass, but not life-threatening. The terrifying part was her silence. Most children would be wailing. She didn't make a sound. She didn't whimper. She just gripped the sterile paper of the exam table with white-knuckled fists. "I'm Abena," I said softly, switching my tone from commander to caregiver. I grabbed a saline rinse and gauze. "I'm going to clean this up, little one. It's going to sting for a second, okay?" The father hovered over my shoulder. "She doesn't speak," he said, his voice tight. "She's traumatized." "I see," I murmured. I poured the saline. The girl flinched, her breath hitching, but she swallowed the scream. That kind of discipline in a child wasn't just trauma. It was learned survival. It broke my heart. "You're doing great," I whispered to her. That's when the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift in pressure. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, a sensation I called the Valkyrie shiver. I glanced at the glass reflection of the clinic doors. 2 men in orderly uniforms had just walked in. They were moving too fast. They weren't looking at clipboards, they were looking at the back of the father's head. One of them reached into a laundry cart and pulled out a suppressed pistol. The father, Mun-Gi, I assumed based on the sheer cost of his suit, was too focused on his daughter's knee to see it. His bodyguards were scanning the windows, not the internal staff. I didn't think. I didn't decide. My body remembered a life I had buried. I grabbed the heavy stainless steel instrument tray from the counter. As the orderly raised the gun, I pivoted on my heel, putting my entire hip rotation into the swing. Crack. The metal edge of the tray connected with the assassin's temple with a sickening, wet thud. He crumbled instantly, the gun skittering across the floor. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive deeper into the shadows, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The room went dead silent. The tray clattered to the floor, slightly dented. The second assassin, stunned by the sudden violence from a pediatric physical therapist, hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was his mistake. Before he could realign his aim, Mun-Gi's guards were on him. It was brutal and efficient, a blur of motion that ended with the second man pinned and unconscious. But the room wasn't looking at the guards. Every pair of eyes was fixed on me. My chest heaved slightly, the only sign of exertion. I realized I was standing in a combat stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees bent, center of gravity low. I forced myself to exhale, straightening my spine, pulling the mask of Abena the therapist back over the face of Valkyrie the mercenary. I turned back to the table. The little girl was staring at me. Her eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were filled with awe. I picked up the tweezers and a cotton swab as if I hadn't just bludgeoned a man into a coma. My hands were perfectly steady. "Sorry about the noise," I told the girl, my voice calm, ignoring the chaotic shouting of the bodyguards securing the perimeter. "Now, let's get a butterfly bandage on this, shall we?" I worked quickly, dressing the wound. The girl didn't look at her leg. She looked at my hands, then up at my face. For a fleeting second, her tiny hand reached out and touched the sleeve of my scrub top. "Done," I said, stepping back. I turned to the sink to wash my hands, scrubbing the imaginary blood off my skin. I could feel him behind me. The father. His presence was heavier than the storm outside. The heat radiating from him was palpable, a mix of adrenaline and something darker, more predatory. The sounds of the room had died down. The unconscious assassins were being dragged out the back exit. I dried my hands with a paper towel and turned around. He was standing intimately close. Too close. I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. He smelled of rain, expensive leather, and gunpowder. His dark hair was dripping onto his forehead, framing eyes that were sharp, intelligent, and currently dissecting me like a biology experiment. He looked at the dented steel tray on the floor. He looked at the unconscious man being hauled away. Then, his gaze slowly traveled up my body, lingering on my hands before locking onto my eyes. "You are not just a nurse," he said, his voice low, vibrating through the small space between us. "Who are you?" I didn't get to answer him. I didn't get to clock out, grab my umbrella, or go home to my reheat-able noodle dinner, and the blissful, boring anonymity I had spent 3 years cultivating. "We are leaving," he stated. It wasn't a suggestion. "I have paperwork," I countered, though the adrenaline was still humming in my veins, making my fingertips buzz. "And the police will want a statement regarding the man currently drooling on my floor. The police are already handled. And you are coming with us for debriefing." Before I could protest, 2 of his suits, massive walls of muscle, flanked me. They didn't touch me, but the threat was implicit. I looked down at Sarang. She was still sitting on the exam table, her legs dangling. She looked at her father, then at the guards, and finally at me. She hopped down, ignoring the wince of pain from her scraped knee, and walked straight past her father. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her small fingers digging into my palm like grappling hooks. Mun-Gi stiffened. I saw a flash of something raw in his eyes. Jealousy? Confusion? Before he masked it with that cold marble indifference. "Fine," I said, realizing I didn't have a choice unless I wanted to fight 6 men in a hallway. "But I'm driving my own." "No," he cut me off. "You ride with us." The interior of the SUV was a cavern of black leather and tinted glass. It smelled of new money and old violence. The rain drummed against the roof, a distant muffled rhythm that felt miles away from the hermetically sealed silence inside. I sat in the back. Mun-Gi sat opposite me in the rear, facing executive seat. Sarang sat between us. By all laws of nature and biology, she should have been curling into her father's side, seeking the comfort of a parent after a trauma. Instead, she was pressed against my side, her head resting on my rib cage. She was tracing the seam of my scrub pants with a finger, completely ignoring the man who would burn the world down for her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I looked out the window at the blurred neon lights of Seoul. My mind was racing, cataloging mistakes. Stance too wide. Swing too precise. Reaction time too fast. I had been sloppy. Valkyrie, the combat medic who could patch a sucking chest wound in a sandstorm while returning fire, was supposed to be dead. Abena Blackwell, the pediatric PT who liked jazz and quiet rainy nights, was supposed to be the reality. I had let the mask slip, and men like Mun-Gi didn't miss things like that. He was tapping on a slim tablet, the blue light casting harsh shadows on his cheekbones. He looked like a fallen angel reviewing the sins of the world. Abena Blackwell, he read aloud, not looking up. Born in Toronto. Degree in kinesiology from U of T. Masters in physical therapy. Moved to Seoul 3 years ago. You volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. You have no parking tickets, no debts, no ex-husbands. He finally looked up. His gaze was heavy, physical. You are remarkably boring, Miss Blackwell. I like boring, I replied, keeping my voice level. Boring is safe. Boring pays the rent. Boring people do not crack a trained assassin's skull with a medical tray, he murmured. And they certainly don't have the situational awareness to spot a suppressed pistol in a reflection. He turned the tablet around. It displayed my employee file. Your background is impeccable. Every reference checks out. Every date aligns. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, invading my space without moving his seat. It's too clean. In my world, a record this perfect is usually a fabrication. A ghost story. I felt Sarang tense against me. I instinctively placed a hand on her shoulder, rubbing my thumb in soothing circles. She relaxed instantly. Mun-Gi watched the interaction, his jaw tightening. I'm just a physical therapist who took a self-defense class, I lied. It was a weak lie, and we both knew it. I need a therapist, he said, shifting gears so fast it gave me whiplash. You have a hospital full of them. I can refer you to a colleague. For her, he clarified, nodding at Sarang. She needs daily physical therapy for her knee rehab, and she needs psychological support. She doesn't speak. She doesn't trust anyone. Yet, she is currently using you as a human shield. He gestured to his daughter, who had practically fused herself to my side. I want you to move into the estate, he continued, his tone businesslike, as if he were ordering a shipment of weapons. Live in care. You will oversee her recovery. You will be her guardian when I am occupied. Triple your current salary. Full benefits. Total discretion. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Mr. Song, look at me. I fix ankle tears and help kids learn to walk again. I don't work for gangsters. I don't live in compounds. And I certainly don't want to be part of whatever this is. I waved a hand around the armored car. Gangster is such a reductive term, he said smoothly. I am a businessman. You're a businessman who brings armed hitmen into a children's ward, I snapped. The anger was bubbling up now. I want to go home. Drop me off at the nearest subway station. Mun-Gi sighed, reaching into his jacket pocket. I tensed, but he only pulled out a silver cigarette case. He didn't open it, he just turned it over in his long fingers. I cannot do that. Am I a prisoner? No. You are a loose end. The air in the car dropped 10 degrees. The men who attacked tonight, he began, his voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. They are from the Snakehead clan. They are not known for their mercy, and they are certainly not known for leaving witnesses. He looked me dead in the eye. They saw your face, Abena. They saw you humiliate one of their best enforcers. By tomorrow morning, your photo will be on the desk of every rival syndicate boss in the city. If I drop you off at a subway station, you will be dead before you swipe your transit card. My stomach turned over. I knew he was right. I knew how these organizations worked. I had dismantled enough of them in my past life to know the protocol. Eliminate all variables. You have 2 choices, he said, leaning back, the predator closing the trap. You can go back to your boring apartment, where they will find you within the hour. Or, you can come to my home. The fortress. It is the safest place in Korea. You work for me, you look after Sarang, and under my protection you live. I looked down at Sarang. She had lifted her head and was looking at me. Her eyes were dark pools of intelligence. She wasn't begging. She was challenging me. "Are you brave enough?" she seemed to ask. I looked back at Mun-Gi. He wasn't smiling. He was waiting. "You're blackmailing me," I hissed. "I am negotiating," he corrected, "and I always close the deal." The car began to slow down. Through the rain-streaked window I saw massive iron gates parting. We weren't at a subway station. We were ascending a winding driveway toward a sprawling brutalist mansion that looked less like a home and more like a citadel. "Welcome home, Miss Blackwell," he whispered. I didn't answer. I just held on to the little girl who refused to let me go, and felt the heavy, suffocating weight of the cage door slamming shut. The gates of the Song estate didn't just open, they parted like the jaws of a leviathan. We drove up a winding, rain-slicked road flanked by high walls that blocked out the rest of Seoul. When the house finally came into view, the word mansion felt inadequate. It was a monolith. It was a sprawling structure of raw concrete, slate, and floor-to-ceiling glass. Sharp angles cut into the night sky, aggressive and imposing. It didn't look like a place where people lived, laughed, or burned toast. It looked like a museum for things that were too dangerous to touch. The SUV stopped under a cantilevered overhang, the engine cut, and the silence rushed back in, heavier than before. "Out," Mun-Gi commanded. I stepped onto the driveway. The air up here was thinner, colder. Sarang scrambled out after me, immediately gripping my hand again. Her small palm was damp. She was terrified of her own home. We walked through the massive front doors into a foyer that could have housed a small aircraft. The floor was black marble, polished to a mirror shine so perfect it felt like walking on water. My sneakers squeaked offensively against the stone. A chaotic, human sound in a space designed for silence. "This is the foyer," Mun-Gi said, his voice echoing off the hard surfaces. He didn't look at me. He was walking briskly, checking his watch. "The East Wing is my private quarters and the operations center. You are strictly forbidden from entering that sector without a direct summons. If you are found there, the security team will not ask questions before they neutralize the threat." "Neutralize," I repeated, scanning the high ceilings. Charming hospitality. He ignored me. "The West Wing is for Sarang. You will have the guest suite adjacent to her room. Your duties begin immediately. You monitor her physical rehab, you oversee her meals, and you ensure she is content." "Content?" I scoffed, looking around. The walls were bare. No photos. No art, just gray concrete and black steel. "Mr. Song, this isn't a home. It's a mausoleum." He stopped dead. The click of his dress shoes on the marble ceased. He turned slowly, the movement predatory. "It is a fortress," he corrected, his voice dropping to that dangerous low register. "It is impenetrable. Blast-proof glass, reinforced steel beams, independent air filtration. She is safe here. She's 5, I shot back, stepping into his personal space. I was tired, I was covered in dried blood that wasn't mine, and I was done being intimidated. "Safety isn't just about bulletproof glass, Mr. Song. A child cannot heal in a prison. Look at this place. Where is the color? Where is the warmth? The acoustics alone are enough to induce anxiety. I did not hire you to decorate," he sneered, towering over me. "I hired you to keep her walking and keep her quiet. She's already quiet." I gestured to Sarang, who was shrinking behind my leg, making herself as small as possible. "That's the problem. She is drowning in silence, and you've built her a tank to sink in." His jaw clenched, a muscle feathering in his cheek. For a second, I saw the crack in the armor. It wasn't anger. It was desperation. He knew. Deep down, the king of the Gem Ryong syndicate knew he was failing the only thing that mattered, and he hated me for pointing it out. "Do your job, Miss Blackwell," he hissed, turning his back on us. "Or I will find someone who will." He stormed off toward the East Wing, leaving us alone in the echoing gray cavern. 2 hours later, the house was even quieter, which I hadn't thought possible. I had gotten Sarang washed and changed. Her room was massive, filled with expensive educational toys that looked like they had never been touched. The bed was a pristine white cloud, too big for her small frame. She was exhausted, but she fought sleep. Every creak of the house, the settling of the concrete, the hum of the HVAC system, made her eyes snap open. She was clutching my sleeve, her knuckles white. "It's okay," I whispered, sitting on the edge of the mattress. The moonlight filtered in through the massive windows, casting long, cage-like shadows across the floor. "The doors are locked." I checked them myself. She stared at me, her eyes pleading. "Don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. "I'm right next door." She shook her head frantically. She didn't want me next door. She wanted me here. I sighed, kicking off my shoes and shifting to sit cross-legged on the rug beside her bed. "Okay, I'll stay until you sleep." She relaxed slightly, but her breathing was still shallow, rapid. The silence of the house was oppressive. It felt like the air was holding its breath. She needed a rhythm, something organic to latch onto. I started to hum. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a melody my grandmother used to hum in our kitchen in Toronto while she braided my hair. A low, soulful tune, neither happy nor sad, just steady. It was the sound of safety. Sarang's eyes fluttered. The sound was alien in this house of glass and steel. It was soft, imperfect, human. I closed my eyes, letting the vibration rumble in my chest. I focused on the melody, blocking out the tactical layout of the house I had been memorizing, blocking out the location of the cameras I had spotted in the hallway. For a moment, I wasn't Valkyrie. I was just Abena. Sarang's breathing slowed. Her grip on the duvet loosened. Finally, she drifted off, her small chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. I kept humming, afraid that if I stopped, the house would wake her up. Then, I felt it. The gaze. My combat instincts flared, but I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't stop humming. I slowly opened my eyes and shifted my gaze to the bedroom door, which I had left cracked open 3 inches. He was there. Mun-Gi was standing in the hallway, framed by the darkness. He had discarded his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were corded with muscle and marked with faint white scars. He wasn't looking at me with the arrogance he had shown in the foyer. He was leaning against the doorframe, his head tipped back slightly against the wood, eyes half closed. He looked utterly drained. He was listening to the humming. For a man who commanded an army, who controlled a sprawling criminal empire, he looked like a man starving for something he couldn't name. He looked at Sarang, sleeping peacefully for the first time in God knows how long, and his expression crumbled. The harsh lines of his face softened into something resembling grief. He caught me watching him. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other through the crack in the door. The air between us crackled, but it wasn't the hostile electricity of the car ride. It was something else. Recognition? He didn't say a word. He didn't order me to stop. He just pushed off the doorframe, straightened his spine, and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet runner. I stayed on the floor, listening to the house settle, realizing that the fortress wasn't built to keep the world out. It was built to keep the ghosts in. And I had just volunteered to be the ghostbuster. 7 days, that's how long I had been an inmate, an employee, at the Song estate. In that week, I had mapped the exits, timed the guard rotations, and memorized the blind spots in the security cameras. Old habits die hard, but mostly, I had learned that boredom was a more effective torture method than waterboarding. Mun-Gi had been gone for 3 days on business, which I assumed involved aggressive negotiations in a warehouse somewhere. The house felt lighter without him. The air was less pressurized. The staff, mostly silent men with earpieces and maids who looked terrified to breathe, seemed to exhale collectively when his motorcade left the gates. I had taken Sarang to the conservatory. It was the only room in the house that felt alive. It was a glass cathedral attached to the west wing, filled with orchids, ferns, and humidity that reminded me of summers in Toronto. Outside, the sky was a bruised gray, threatening another downpour, but in here it was warm. We were sitting on a teak bench, surrounded by monsteras. I had a basket of hair ribbons in my lap. Sarang was sitting between my knees, her back to me, as I carefully detangled her long, silky black hair. "You have a lot of hair for such a little person," I murmured, working a wide tooth comb through a knot near the ends. She didn't react, just stared intently at a caterpillar crawling on a leaf in front of us. "You know," I continued, keeping up the one-sided conversation I had perfected over the last week. "I had a dog once, a bulldog named Barnaby. He was convinced he was a ballerina. He'd try to jump on the back of the couch like a cat, and he'd just slide off. Slowly, with this look of absolute betrayal on his face. I chuckled at the memory. He never barked either. He just snorted, judgmentally. I paused, waiting for the usual nothingness. Sarang usually communicated with blinks or by gripping my hand. But today, she was still. I picked up 2 ribbons from the basket. One was a soft pastel pink, the kind appropriate for a 5-year-old. The other was a deep, royal purple velvet. "All right, boss," I said, holding them up to her peripheral vision. "Which one today? Pink makes you look like a cupcake. Purple makes you look like royalty." I expected her to point. That was the routine. Instead, Sarang stiffened. She didn't look at the ribbons. She slowly turned her head to the left, scanning the glass entrance of the conservatory. 2 of Mun-Gi's guards were stationed there, but they were on the other side of the thick glass, engaged in a conversation, laughing at something on a phone. They were distracted. They couldn't hear us over the hum of the ventilation fans and the rustle of the leaves. Sarang turned her head to the right, checking the dense foliage. Clear. Then, she turned around on the bench to face me. Her dark eyes, usually so guarded and fearful, were suddenly sharp. Calculating. "The purple one," she said. The voice was clear, melodic, and terrifyingly normal. I dropped the comb. It clattered onto the teak floor, the sound exploding in the quiet greenhouse. I froze, my hands hovering in the air. I stared at her. My brain misfired. I had read the medical files. Selective mutism. Trauma-induced. No vocalization in 3 years. I had treated children with this condition. It wasn't something you just switched off like a light. "You?" I choked out, my voice failing me. "You can speak?" Sarang rolled her eyes. It was such a precocious teenager-like gesture that it almost made me laugh in hysteria. She reached out and placed a small finger against her lips. "Shh," she whispered, her eyes darting back to the guards outside the glass. "Don't be loud. They're stupid, but they aren't deaf." I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. "You're faking it." "I'm not faking," she corrected, crossing her small arms over her chest. "I'm choosing." "Choosing?" "Sarang, your father is tearing the world apart trying to fix you. He thinks you're broken. He's an idiot," she stated matter-of-factly. I blinked. "He's the terrifying head of a crime syndicate, Sarang." "He's just a dad," she dismissed. "And he's never home. He leaves me here with the guards and the maids. The maids are boring. The guards are scary. And then..." She scrunched up her nose in disgust. "He brings the ladies." "The ladies?" "The ones with the big lips and the perfume that smells like bug spray," she explained. "They try to be my mommy. They talk to me like I'm a baby. Oh, you poor thing, you're so pretty. I hate them." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "If I don't talk, they get scared. They think I'm creepy. One time, I just stared at a lady for an hour without blinking, and she left before dessert. A bubble of laughter rose in my throat. I tried to suppress it, but it escaped as a snort. This child wasn't a victim. She was a mastermind. She was waging a psychological guerrilla war against her father's dating life and winning. "So you're silent to punish him?" I asked, looking at her with new eyes. "He needs to learn," she said simply. Then her expression softened. She looked down at her hands. "And if I don't talk, people forget I'm there." They say things. Secrets. I know lots of things. I felt a chill go down my spine. Silence is a weapon. I had said that to myself in the car. This 5-year-old had figured it out on her own. She was definitely Mun-Gi's daughter. Why tell me? I asked quietly. Why break cover now? Sarang looked up. Her gaze was unnervingly direct. She reached out and touched the faded scar on my forearm, a souvenir from a knife fight in Sudan. You aren't a plastic lady, she said. You didn't scream when the bad men came to the clinic. You hit that man with the tray. Bam. She mimed the motion with a grin. You're strong. Like a superhero. She paused, searching my face. And you smell like peppermint and sadness. Not bug spray. Peppermint and sadness. Jesus, this kid was perceptive. I need a partner, she declared, holding out her hand. But you can't tell Daddy. Not yet. He has to suffer a little bit more. I looked at her small hand. I looked at the determined set of her jaw. I was supposed to be the responsible adult. I was supposed to march straight to the East Wing and report this breakthrough to her father. It was my job. But then I thought about Mun-Gi's arrogance. I thought about the plastic ladies. And I thought about the sheer audacious brilliance of this little girl surviving in a fortress of solitude by becoming a ghost. I saw myself in her. The girl who hid. The girl who observed. The girl who became dangerous to survive. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had worn in a week. Okay, tiny boss, I whispered. I reached out and hooked my pinky finger around hers. Her grip was tight. I won't tell him, I promised. But you have to promise me something too. What? If we get attacked again, you tell me if you see something. No secrets when it comes to safety. Deal? She nodded solemnly. Deal. She turned back around, presenting her back to me. Now do the purple ribbon. And make it tight. I want to look fierce. I picked up the velvet ribbon, my hands shaking slightly. As I wove the purple velvet into her dark braid, I realized the dynamic of the house had just shifted fundamentally. It wasn't just me against the fortress anymore. It was me and Sarang against the world. And honestly, I liked our odds. 2:14 am. The numbers on the digital clock were glowing angry red in the darkness. I was asleep in the wingback chair I had dragged next to Sarang's bed. My neck cricked at an angle that I knew I'd regret in the morning. I didn't wake up because of a sound. The house was silent. I woke up because the air pressure in the room had changed. A heavy, magnetic weight had entered the space. My eyes snapped open. Mun-Gi was standing in the doorway. He was a silhouette against the dim hallway light, still wearing his suit trousers, his white shirt unbuttoned and hanging loose. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Sarang. She was curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other loosely gripping my pinky finger, which was dangling over the armrest of the chair. It was a picture of perfect peace. And looking at Mun-Gi's face, I saw that he hated it. His expression wasn't just tired, it was ravaged. There was a hollow look in his eyes, a mixture of longing and bitter, acidic jealousy. He looked at her hand holding mine, the trust that implied, and his jaw worked tight. He was the king of Seoul, but he couldn't buy this. He couldn't command his daughter to sleep without nightmares. Then, the wind shifted from the hallway, and the smell hit me. Copper. Iron. Fresh blood. I sat up straighter, my joints popping. Mun-Gi's eyes snapped to mine. The vulnerability vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, hard shudder. He turned on his heel and walked away without a word. I carefully extracted my finger from Sarang's grip, tucked the duvet around her shoulders, and followed him. I found him in the kitchen. It was a sleek, industrial space of stainless steel and black granite, illuminated only by the under-cabinet lighting. He was sitting on a bar stool at the island, a bottle of Hibiki whiskey open next to him. A first aid kit, the small, useless kind people keep in cars, was spilled open on the counter. He was trying to thread a needle with shaking hands. A jagged, angry slash ran across his left ribcage. It wasn't deep enough to hit an organ, but it was ugly, weeping blood down his sculpted side. "You're going to give yourself sepsis," I said, my voice echoing in the large room. He didn't look up. "Go back to bed, Miss Blackwell, and let you stitch a dirty wound with a sewing needle and whiskey? I'd have to file so much paperwork when you die of infection." I walked over to the sink and scrubbed my hands, then moved to the island. I swept his pathetic attempt at first aid aside. "Sit still," I commanded. I said, "I know what you said. But unless you want a scar that pulls every time you twist your torso, you'll let me do this. I've stitched up worse in the back of a moving Humvee." He paused, looking at me with glazed, fever-bright eyes. He slumped slightly, the adrenaline of his trip finally wearing off. "Fine." I grabbed the proper medical kit I had stashed in the pantry, because I never trusted civilian supplies, and pulled out disinfectant, lidocaine, and proper sutures. "This will sting," I warned. I poured the disinfectant over the wound. He hissed, his hands gripping the edge of the granite counter so hard his knuckles turned white. He didn't make a sound, but his abdominal muscles seized, hard as rock under my fingertips. "Breathe," I murmured, my voice dropping to that professional rhythmic cadence I used for patients. In through the nose, out through the mouth. I worked quickly. My hands, usually cool, felt hot against his skin. His skin was burning, he was radiating heat like a furnace. Every time I brushed against him to wipe away blood, I felt a jolt of electricity zip up my arm. "You are making her weak," he said suddenly. His voice was rough, strained. I paused, holding the needle. "Excuse me?" "Sarang," he gritted out, staring straight ahead at the backsplash. "Sleeping in her room, holding her hand. You are making her dependent on you. You are a crutch." "I'm providing stability," I countered, piercing the skin for the first stitch. He flinched. "She needs to know she's not alone." "She is alone," he said darkly. "That is the nature of this life. Everyone leaves. You will leave." "I'm not the one disappearing for 3 days without a phone call," I snapped, tying off the knot. "I'm not the one coming home at 2 and bleeding from a knife fight." He turned his head slowly to look at me. Our faces were inches apart. "I bleed so she does not have to. I disappear so the monsters do not come to this house." "Well, it's not working," I whispered. "The monsters are already here, Mun-Gi. They're just inside your head." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. The silence was heavy, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and our breathing. I needed to cut the thread. I leaned in, my chest brushing his arm, reaching across him for the scissors. I smelled the whiskey on his breath, the rain on his hair, and the dark, musky scent of his skin. It was intoxicating. It was dangerous. He moved faster than an injured man should. His hand shot out and clamped around my wrist. His grip was iron. He didn't hurt me, but he trapped me. He pulled me in until my thighs bumped against his knees, trapping me between his spread legs and the granite island. I froze. I looked up. His eyes were dilated, pools of obsidian that swallowed the light. He wasn't looking at me like an employee anymore. He was looking at me like I was the oxygen in a burning room. "You have a mouth on you, Abena," he murmured. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. "And you have a bleeding rib," I replied, though my voice was breathless, betraying me. "Let me go." "No." He leaned forward. The heat coming off him was overwhelming. I could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, or maybe that was my own. "I walk into my house," he whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through my chest, "and I see you in her room. You smell like peppermint and sleep. You look—" He shook his head, frustration warring with desire. "I don't know if I want to fire you for making me feel this incompetent, or if I want to." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He leaned closer. His nose brushed against my temple, inhaling sharply. He was smelling me, taking me in. My hands were resting on his bare chest right over his heart. I should have pushed him away. I should have used a defensive maneuver to break his grip. I didn't move. I couldn't. The tension was a physical thing, a taut wire pulled to the breaking point. If he moved an inch, our lips would touch. If he moved an inch, I would let him. For a long, suspended second, we existed in the space between a fight and a kiss. Then, he released my wrist as if I had burned him. He pushed himself back on the stool, putting distance between us. He ran a hand through his hair, turning his face away. "Finish the bandage," he commanded, his voice cold again, though it lacked its usual steadiness. "And then, get out of my sight." I stood there for a moment, my skin tingling where he had touched me. I swallowed hard, regaining my composure. I taped the gauze over his stitches with efficient, trembling hands. "Good night, Mr. Song," I said stiffly. I walked out of the kitchen without looking back, but I could feel his eyes burning a hole in my spine until I turned the corner. The silence in the house had mutated. Before the kitchen incident, it was cold. Now, it was heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on my arms stand up whenever Mun-Gi walked into a room. We hadn't spoken about the near kiss. We hadn't spoken about the blood or the whiskey. We simply orbited each other like two planets on a collision course. Then, the box appeared on my bed. It was black velvet, tied with a silver ribbon. Inside lay a gown of liquid gold silk. It wasn't just a dress. It was a statement. I lifted it out, the fabric pouring over my hands like water. It was backless, with a plunging neckline and a slit that ran dangerously high up the left thigh. A note was tucked into the folds. The Goryeo Charity Gala. 7 p.m. Be ready. It wasn't a request. I stood before the full-length mirror in the guest suite. The dress was a masterpiece of engineering. It clung to every curve, the deep gold contrasting sharply against my dark skin, making me look like a cast bronze statue. But I wasn't looking at the fashion. I was looking at the function. I tested the range of motion. A deep squat. A high kick. The silk held but didn't tear. Good. I hiked up the skirt. The slit was high enough to grant access to my upper thigh. I strapped a thin, non-metallic ceramic knife sheath against my skin. It was invisible under the drape of the fabric. I applied my makeup, sharp eyeliner, blood-red lipstick. War paint. When I walked down the grand staircase, Mun-Gi was waiting in the foyer. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him with criminal perfection, the black wool emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. He looked up. For a second, his composure fractured. His eyes widened, taking in the gold silk, the bare back, the way the light caught my skin. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the hall. "Adequate." "High praise," I replied dryly, descending the last step. "The car is waiting." The venue was the Grand Hyatt Seoul. As the limousine pulled up to the red carpet, the world exploded into blinding flashes of light. The paparazzi were a feral pack, screaming Mun-Gi's name. The door opened. Mun-Gi stepped out first, buttoning his jacket. He turned and extended a hand to me. I took it. His grip was firm, grounding. As I stepped out into the chaos, the screaming intensified. "Who is she? Look at the dress." "Mr. Song." Mun-Gi ignored them all. He moved to my side, placing his hand on the small of my back. His palm was hot through the thin silk. It wasn't a gentleman's touch. It was a brand. It was possessive, heavy, and guided me with an unspoken command. "You are with me." He leaned in close to my ear, his breath tickling my neck. "Smile, Abena. Everyone here is a shark. Don't show them you bleed." "I don't bleed," I whispered back, flashing a dazzling fake smile at the cameras. "I make others bleed." I felt his chest rumble with a silent chuckle against my shoulder. We entered the ballroom. It was a cavern of crystal chandeliers, orchestral music, and the cloying scent of expensive perfume masking the smell of corruption. This was where the monsters of Seoul played dress-up. Politicians, CEOs, syndicate bosses, they were all here, sipping champagne and plotting each other's demise. I went into scan mode. I wasn't looking at the diamonds, I was looking at hands. Pockets. Exits. "Drink?" Mun-Gi offered, snagging a flute from a passing tray. "Water. I don't drink on the job." "You aren't on the job. You are my date. I'm your liability insurance, I corrected, taking the water. We circulated. Mun-Gi was a master at this. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and accepted bows with the grace of a feudal lord, but I felt the tension in his arm linked with mine. He was waiting for something. Song Mun-Gi, a greasy voice slithered through the air. I didn't think you'd show your face after the unpleasantness at the docks. We turned. Standing there was a man who looked like a bloated toad in an ill-fitting suit. Director Choi, the head of the Snakehead clan, the man who had sent the assassins to the clinic. My pulse spiked, but my face remained bored. Director Choi, Mun-Gi said smoothly, though the temperature around us dropped 10 degrees. I believe the unpleasantness was entirely on your side. My shipments arrived on time. Choi's eyes narrowed. Then they slid to me. He looked me up and down, lingering on the slit of my dress with a sneer of disgust. And who is this? Choi laughed, a wet, hacking sound. I didn't know you were importing exotic pets now, Mun-Gi. How much per hour? Or did you pick her up from the red light district on your way here? It was a calculated insult, designed to make Mun-Gi lose face in front of the elites. Mun-Gi went rigid. His hand on my arm tightened to a bruise. He was about to snap. But I wasn't looking at Choi. I was looking over his shoulder. A waiter was approaching from the 4 o'clock position. He wasn't carrying a tray. His gaze was locked on Mun-Gi's chest. His right hand was dipping inside his white service jacket. The movement was subtle. Too subtle for a civilian. But to me it was a neon sign. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I squeezed Mun-Gi's bicep. 2 short, sharp pulses. Threat. Right. I shifted my weight, pivoting my body so that I was no longer a decorative object, but a shield on his flank. Mun-Gi felt the signal. He didn't question it. He didn't look around. He trusted me instantly. He shifted his stance, angling his body to shield me while simultaneously putting himself out of the direct line of fire from the approaching waiter. He stared straight at Choi, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. The waiter, realizing his line of sight was broken and that Mun-Gi was suddenly alert, aborted the motion. He veered off toward the kitchen, disappearing into the crowd. We were safe. Mun-Gi looked back at Choi. The insult was still hanging in the air. Mun-Gi took a step forward, invading Choi's personal space. He didn't shout. He spoke in a voice that was soft, lethal, and loud enough for the surrounding circle of elites to hear. Careful, Director, Mun-Gi said, his hand sliding down my arm to interlace his fingers with mine, lifting our joined hands for everyone to see. She is not a pet. She is my partner. He smiled, a razor-sharp expression that promised violence, and I would advise you not to insult her again. She bites. Choi paled. He looked from Mun-Gi to me. I dropped the board facade and let the Valkyrie surface. I gave him a look that said, I know where your jugular is, and I have a knife strapped to my thigh. Choi swallowed hard, muttered a hasty excuse, and scurried away into the crowd. Mun-Gi didn't let go of my hand. He pulled me closer until my side was pressed against his tuxedo. You saw him, Mun-Gi murmured, not looking at me, scanning the room. The waiter. 4 o'clock. Glock 19 in a shoulder holster, judging by the print, I whispered back. He's gone now. Mun-Gi finally looked down at me. The admiration in his eyes was raw. It wasn't the look of a man looking at a pretty woman. It was the look of a king realizing he had found a queen who could hold a sword. Partner, he tested the word, tasting it. Partner, I agreed, feeling a thrill that had nothing to do with the ceramic knife and everything to do with the man holding my hand. But you still owe me for the dress. I'll buy you the whole damn store, he promised. And as the orchestra swelled into a waltz, for the first time, I actually believed him. Happiness, I had learned long ago, was usually a trap. It was the cheese in the mousetrap, the siren song before the ship hit the rocks. I should have known better. The morning after the gala was deceptively perfect. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a scrubbed, innocent blue. We were in the breakfast nook, a sun-drenched corner of the kitchen that felt miles away from the brutalist architecture of the rest of the house. Mun-Gi was drinking black coffee, reading a tablet. I was nursing a cup of tea, watching the way the morning light caught the sharp angle of his jaw. He looked different today. Lighter. The heavy mantle of the syndicate head seemed to sit a little looser on his shoulders. He caught me staring and didn't scowl. Instead, the corner of his mouth quirked up. "Is there something on my face, Miss Blackwell?" "Just a lack of scowls," I replied, taking a sip. "It's unsettling. You look almost approachable." "Don't get used to it," he murmured, but his eyes were warm. "Sarang is asking for pancakes. I told her you don't cook, but she insists." The heavy oak doors of the kitchen slammed open. The sound shattered the morning like a gunshot. Mun-Gi's smile vanished instantly, replaced by the mask of the boss. Lieutenant Han, the chief of security, marched in. He was a man I had never liked, too slick, too eager, with eyes that never quite met yours. Behind him were 2 armed guards. "Sir," Han said, his voice grave, dripping with faux concern. "We need to talk. Immediately. It concerns a security breach." Mun-Gi didn't stand up, but his posture shifted. He became a statue. "Speak." Han didn't speak. He walked to the marble island and tossed a clear evidence bag onto the surface. Inside was a cheap, black burner phone. It slid across the counter and stopped inches from my teacup. "We found this in Miss Blackwell's bag during a routine sweep," Han said. He refused to look at me. I frowned, putting my cup down. "That's not mine. We unlocked it," Han continued, ignoring me. He placed a stack of printed transcripts next to the phone. Outgoing messages to a number registered to a shell company owned by the Snakehead clan. Specifically to Director Choi's personal assistant. The air in the room didn't just cool, it froze. Mun-Gi picked up the papers. His movements were slow, deliberate. I watched his eyes scan the text. I saw the moment the warmth from earlier died a violent death. Target moving to Hyatt at 1900 hours. Minimal security detail. Flank is exposed. Mun-Gi read aloud. His voice was devoid of inflection. He flipped the page. Wire transfer confirmed. 500,000 US to account ending in 4490. Cayman Islands. Beneficiary Abena Blackwell. He dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. He looked at me. I had seen Mun-Gi angry. I had seen him violent. But I had never seen him look like this. He looked hollowed out. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. He had let me in. He had let me hold his daughter. He had almost kissed me in this very kitchen. And now, he was looking at a monster. "Mun-Gi," I said, standing up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer shock of the fabrication. "I didn't write those. I have never seen that phone. You know who I am." "Do I?" he asked softly. "I know you are a ghost with no history. I know you have combat skills that exceed a simple medic. I know you were the one who suggested we go out the back exit at the gala, the same exit mentioned in these texts as a secondary ambush point. I suggested it because the front was swarming with press. I argued, my voice rising. And I saved you inside. I spotted the waiter. A performance, Han interjected smoothly. To gain trust. To embed yourself deeper so you could deliver the kill shot later. It's a classic sleeper agent tactic, sir. You lying snake. I hissed, lunging toward Han. The 2 guards behind him moved instantly, grabbing my arms. I could have broken their grip, a twist, a stomp to the knee. But I stopped myself. Violence would only look like guilt. "Mun-Gi, look at me," I pleaded, struggling against the guards. "This is a setup." Han planted it. Why would I jeopardize Sarang? I love that little girl. At the mention of Sarang, Mun-Gi flinched as if I had slapped him. "Do not speak her name," he roared. The sound vibrated in my chest. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He reached into the waistband of his trousers and pulled out his gun. A sleek, black Beretta. He leveled it at my chest. The kitchen went deadly silent. I stared down the barrel of the gun. I looked past it, into the eyes of the man I was falling in love with. Mun-Gi, I whispered. I am innocent. His finger tightened on the trigger. His knuckles were white. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He wanted to do it. He wanted to erase the mistake, erase the vulnerability I represented. But his hand was shaking. It was a micro-tremor, invisible to anyone but a sniper or a surgeon. He couldn't do it. He stared at me for an eternity, searching for the lie in my eyes, or maybe searching for the truth he couldn't afford to believe. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered the gun. "Get out," he rasped. His voice was broken glass. "Mun-Gi, get out," he screamed, slamming the gun onto the counter. "Before I change my mind, if I see you in Seoul again, if you ever come near my daughter again, I will kill you myself." He turned his back on me. The dismissal was absolute. "Escort her off the premises," Han ordered, a smug smile finally touching his lips. "And check her for weapons." The guards dragged me backward. I stumbled, my heels skidding on the marble. "Mun-Gi, listen to me. Han is the mole." I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. "He's the only one who had access to my bag. He's isolating you." Mun-Gi didn't turn around. He stood gripping the counter, his head bowed, a portrait of a man destroyed. They hauled me through the foyer. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarang. I had to tell her. I had to explain. "Let me say goodbye to her," I begged the guards as we passed the West Wing corridor. "Please, just 5 minutes." Han stepped in front of me, blocking the hallway. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice. "The little mute is better off without a traitor," he sneered. "She's probably crying right now because her daddy is so sad. And it's all your fault." I wanted to headbutt him. I wanted to tear his throat out. But the guards shoved me forward, forcing me toward the massive front doors. They opened the heavy oak doors and threw me out. Literally. I stumbled down the stone steps, scraping my hands on the rough driveway. The sky, mocking the morning's peace, had opened up again. A sudden torrential downpour soaked me to the bone in seconds. The heavy iron gates clanged shut behind me with a sound of finality. The electronic lock beeped. I stood there, shivering, mud staining my jeans, my hair plastered to my face. I was alone. I was disavowed. I was a target for every enemy Mun-Gi had. I looked up at the fortress. It loomed gray and impassive against the storm. I wiped the rain from my eyes. The despair that had threatened to drown me began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Han hadn't just framed me to get rid of a nuisance. He had framed me to remove Mun-Gi's only blind spot. He had removed the only person who was watching the shadows. They didn't kick me out because I was a traitor. They kicked me out because they were planning to kill Mun-Gi, and they knew I was the only one who could stop them. My hands curled into fists. The pediatric therapist died in that rain. Valkyrie woke up. I wasn't going to the airport. I wasn't running. I turned and looked toward the city skyline, my eyes narrowing. "You made a mistake, Han," I whispered to the thunder. "You should have shot me when you had the chance." I started walking, not away from the danger, but into the dark to find a weapon. The house was a tomb. 3 hours had passed since I had thrown her out. 3 hours since I had watched the only woman who made this cold concrete hell feel like a home disappear into the rain. I sat in my office, the lights off, illuminated only by the jagged flashes of lightning tearing through the Seoul sky. A glass of hibiki sat untouched on the mahogany desk, next to the Beretta. I stared at the gun. It felt heavy, accusing. "She betrayed you," I told myself for the 1,000th time. "She sold you out. The evidence was there." But then I remembered her eyes. Dark, desperate, pleading. "If you think I'm capable of this, you don't know me at all." Did I? I knew the shape of her hands when she stitched me up. I knew the scent of peppermint that lingered in the hallways she walked. I knew the way she protected my daughter with a ferocity that matched my own. A traitor could fake loyalty. But could a traitor fake the way her heart hammered against my chest in the kitchen? The door to my office flew open. I didn't look up. "Leave me, Han." I said no disturbances. I'm not Han. The thought was internal, but the presence wasn't. Small footsteps stomped across the Persian rug. Fast. Angry. I looked up. Sarang stood in front of my desk. She looked terrifying. Her hair was a mess, her face red and blotchy, but her eyes weren't filled with the tears of a scared child. They were blazing with the fury of a song. She was trembling, her small fists clenched at her sides. "Sarang," I croaked, my voice ravaged by the whiskey and the screaming. I stood up, rounding the desk. I needed to hold her. I needed to apologize for taking away her friend. "I know you're sad, little bird," I said gently, reaching out to stroke her hair. She was a bad person, Sarang. She lied to us. She was going to hurt Daddy." Sarang slapped my hand away. The sound was sharp in the silent room. I froze, stunned. She had never raised a hand to me. She had never defied me. She took a deep breath, her chest heaving, her face twisting in frustration. She opened her mouth, her jaw working as she fought against 3 years of silence. She didn't do it. The scream tore through her throat, raw and gravelly, but loud enough to shatter the windows. I stopped breathing. The glass of whiskey I had been holding in my other hand slipped from my fingers. It hit the floor, shattering amber liquid splashing over my shoes. I didn't feel it. I stared at my daughter. The world had stopped turning. "Sarang?" I whispered, my knees feeling weak. You are stupid," she screamed, the words tumbling out now. Faster, desperate. "You are stupid, Daddy. She didn't do it. Uncle Han did it." She was sobbing now, but she didn't stop shouting. She grabbed my suit jacket, shaking me with all her tiny strength. "I saw him," she wailed. "I was playing hide and seek, under the breakfast table. I saw Uncle Han take the phone from his pocket. He put it in Abena's bag when she went to get tea. He did it. He's the bad one." The world didn't just tilt, it inverted. The air left the room. My heart stopped, then restarted with a violent, agonizing thud. Under the table. Of course. She was always there. The silent observer. The ghost in the room that everyone forgot. Everyone except Abena. And Han. Han, who had been by my side for 10 years. Han, who had handed me the evidence with shaking hands. It's a classic sleeper agent tactic, sir. The rage that flooded my veins was not hot. It was absolute zero. It was the cold, dead vacuum of space. I had exiled the woman I loved. I had thrown her to the wolves. And I had kept the snake in my bed. I looked down at Sarang. She was hiccuping, wiping her nose on her sleeve, looking at me with accusation. "You sent her away," she cried, her voice breaking. "Fix it." I dropped to my knees, heedless of the broken glass. I grabbed Sarang's face in my hands. "I will," I swore, my voice shaking. "I swear to you." I stood up. The grief was gone. The self-pity was gone. There was only the mission. I walked to the door and threw it open. Lieutenant Han was standing right there, stationed as my personal guard. He looked up, his face composing itself into a mask of loyal concern. "Sir, is everything all right?" I didn't let him finish. I grabbed him by the throat. I slammed him backward into the opposing wall. The drywall cracked behind his head. He clawed at my hand, his eyes bulging, but I didn't let go. I squeezed, crushing his windpipe just enough to panic him. "Sarang speaks," I snarled into his face, watching the terror dawn in his eyes. "And she has a very interesting story about a breakfast table and a burner phone." Han's face turned purple. He tried to reach for his sidearm. I caught his wrist. I twisted. Snap. His scream was strangled by my grip on his throat. I dropped him to the floor, then placed my boot on his broken wrist, applying pressure until he whimpered. "You have 5 seconds," I said, my voice devoid of humanity. "Where is she?" "Director Choi." Han gasped, tears streaming down his face. "He paid, double, promised me the territory." "Where is she, Han?" I crushed his wrist harder. "Incheon," he screamed. "Incheon docks. Warehouse 4. Choi is shipping her out tonight. She's the gift." I stepped back. I didn't kill him. Death was too easy. Guards. I roared. 3 men sprinted down the hallway. They stopped, looking from me to the broken heap of their commander on the floor. Take this trash to the basement, I ordered. Keep him alive. I want to take him apart slowly when I return. I turned back to the office. Sarang was standing in the doorway watching me. She wasn't scared of the violence. She was waiting. I walked over to the gun rack on the wall. I pulled down a customized AR-15 and a Kevlar vest. I grabbed the keys to the fastest car in the garage, the McLaren. I looked at my daughter. For the first time in years, I didn't see a broken victim. I saw a warrior. I am going to get her, I told her. Sarang nodded, her eyes fierce, drying her tears. Bring Mom home, she commanded. I turned and ran toward the garage. Rain or fire, hell or high water, nothing was going to stop me. Choi wanted a war? I was going to bring him the apocalypse. The smell of Incheon was unmistakable, rotting fish, diesel, and the salt of the Yellow Sea. I was sitting in the center of Warehouse 4, zip-tied to a rusted steel chair. The rain hammered against the corrugated tin roof like a drum roll for an execution. My lip was split where one of the goons had backhanded me for talking too much, and the metallic tang of blood filled my mouth. Director Choi was pacing in front of me, checking his Rolex. You really are a tragic figure, Miss Blackwell, he mused, his voice oily. Mun-Gi has good taste, I'll give him that. But he's sentimental. That was his downfall. He stopped, leaning down to inspect me. Don't worry. The buyer in Macau pays a premium for exotic beauties. You'll live a long, very uncomfortable life. I didn't flinch. I stared at his throat, calculating the pounds of pressure required to crush his larynx. You're assuming the shipment leaves the dock, I said calmly. Choi laughed. Who is going to stop me? Mun-Gi thinks you're a traitor. By the time he figures it out, you'll be halfway across the Pacific. His phone buzzed. He frowned. I have to check the perimeter. Watch her, he snapped at the lone guard stationed by the sliding bay doors. If she moves, shoot her leg. Choi walked out into the rain with 8 of his men, leaving me with the rookie. Big mistake. The rookie was young, jittery. He held his submachine gun loosely, distracted by the lightning flashing outside. I took a deep breath. This was going to hurt. I focused on my left thumb. I had learned this trick in a SARE training camp in Nevada. Collapse the knuckle. Tuck. Pull. I forced my thumb joint inward. A sharp, sickening pop echoed in my bones, sending white-hot pain shooting up my arm. I bit the inside of my cheek to stifle the scream, tasting more blood. With the joint dislocated, my hand was narrow enough. I greased it with the sweat and rain on my skin and pulled. The zip tie bit into my wrist, shredding the skin, but my hand slid free. I didn't hesitate to relocate the thumb. There was no time. The guard turned, hearing the rustle. Hey, sit still. I launched myself out of the chair. I covered the 10 feet between us before he could raise the barrel. I didn't go for the gun. I went for the neck. I leaped, scissoring my legs around his throat, using my momentum to swing my body weight down. Crack. He dropped like a stone. I rolled, snatching the MP5 from his dead hands and a combat knife from his belt. I crouched behind a stack of shipping crates, popping my thumb back into its socket with a grit of teeth and a low growl. Valkyrie is online. Suddenly, a roar drowned out the thunder. It wasn't a truck. It was the high-pitched scream of a twin-turbo V8 engine pushed to the red line. The warehouse doors didn't open. They exploded inward. A sleek black McLaren smashed through the corrugated metal, sending sheets of steel and debris flying like shrapnel. The car skidded across the wet concrete, fishtailing violently before coming to a halt in the center of the room. The driver's side door flew open. Song Mun-Gi stepped out. He looked like the wrath of God. He was wearing a Kevlar vest over a white shirt that was already soaked with rain. He held an AR-15 in a grip that promised death. Abena, he screamed, his voice raw with panic. Choi's men, who had rushed back in at the sound of the crash, opened fire. Mun-Gi didn't take cover. He walked forward, firing with terrifying precision, taking down 2 men on the gantry. But he was exposed. A gunman popped up from behind a forklift on his blind side. Clear left. I shouted. I broke cover. I raised the MP5 and dropped the gunman with a double tap to the chest. Mun-Gi spun around. He expected to find a damsel tied to a chair. He expected to find a victim. Instead, he saw me. Standing amidst the wreckage, blood on my lip, a submachine gun in my hands, and a dead man at my feet. His eyes widened. For a split second, the shock on his face was comical. Then, a feral grin split his face. "Partner," he acknowledged. "Stop staring and shoot." I yelled. We moved. It wasn't a chaotic brawl. It was a symphony. We gravitated toward each other instinctively, meeting in the center of the warehouse. We stood back to back, a rotating turret of violence. Reloading. I called out, dropping my mag. "Covering." He replied, spraying suppression fire to the right, keeping their heads down while I slotted a fresh magazine. 2 on the catwalk. Got them. Bang. Bang. We moved through the warehouse like smoke. I swept the legs of an attacker who got too close, finishing him with the knife. Mun-Gi used the stock of his rifle to shatter the jaw of another. We didn't need to communicate. I knew when he was pivoting. He knew when I was ducking. It was the most intimate we had ever been. Amidst the gunfire and the blood, we were perfectly synchronized. Silence fell. The last guard dropped. "Choi." Mun-Gi roared, scanning the room. There, I pointed. Director Choi was scrambling toward the hole the McLaren had made, trying to escape into the rain. He was limping, clutching a briefcase of money. Mun-Gi raised his rifle, but I put a hand on his barrel, lowering it. "No," I said, my chest heaving. "He's mine." I drew the combat knife I had taken from the guard. I measured the distance, 30 feet. I took a breath, feeling the rotation of the blade in my mind before I even threw it. I whipped my arm forward. The knife spun through the air, a silver blur. It buried itself to the hilt in Choi's right calf. He screamed, collapsing face first into the mud and broken glass. We walked over to him together. The rain was pouring in through the broken doors, washing the blood from our hands. Choi rolled over, clutching his leg, looking up at us with pure terror. He looked at Mun-Gi, the king of the underworld, and then at me, the pediatric physical therapist. "Who are you?" He wheezed, staring at me. "I'm the woman who bites," I whispered. Mun-Gi stepped forward, placing his boot on Choi's chest. He didn't say a word. He just aimed his pistol between Choi's eyes and pulled the trigger. Bang. It was over. The silence rushed back in, deafening after the noise. Mun-Gi dropped his gun. He turned to me. The adrenaline was fading from his eyes, replaced by a frantic, crushing fear. "Abena," he breathed. He closed the distance in 2 strides. His hands came up to cup my face. They were trembling. He tilted my head back, his eyes scanning every inch of my face, the split lip, the bruised wrist, the rain-soaked hair. "I thought I lost you," he choked out. "I thought—" When I saw the empty chair, he rested his forehead against mine. He was shaking. The mighty Song Mun-Gi, who had just massacred a warehouse of men, was shaking because he thought I was gone. "I'm here," I whispered, leaning into his touch. "I'm okay. I am sorry," he murmured against my skin, his thumbs brushing away the rain on my cheeks. "I should have trusted you. I should have known. I will spend the rest of my life earning your forgiveness." I pulled back slightly, just enough to look him in the eyes. The dark pools were open, vulnerable, stripped of all defenses. "You came for me," I said softly. "You drove a McLaren through a wall for me. I would have burned the city down," he vowed. "I know. I didn't need words. I didn't need groveling. I needed him." I reached up, tangling my fingers in his wet hair, and pulled his mouth down to mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of rain, adrenaline, and survival. It was a claim. "I am yours. You are mine. And we are alive." He groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around my waist, lifting me off the ground, crushing me against his chest as if he wanted to fuse our bones together. "Let's go home," he whispered against my lips. "Sarang is waiting." "Yeah," I smiled, burying my face in his neck. "Let's go home." 6 months ago, the Song estate had been a mausoleum of gray concrete and silence. Today, it was chaos. But it was the best kind of chaos. The winter sun streamed through the blast-proof windows, but now it landed on Persian rugs, scattered Lego sets, and a massive Christmas tree that dominated the foyer. No. The red bauble goes on the left. Use your eyes, please. I leaned against the balcony railing, sipping coffee, watching the scene below. Sarang was directing 3 terrifyingly large bodyguards on how to hang the Boxing Day garlands. She wasn't pointing. She was commanding. Her voice, once a secret she kept from the world, was now the soundtrack of our lives. She was loud, she was bossy, and she was absolutely Mun-Gi's daughter. "She is going to run the company by the time she is 12, a deep voice rumbled behind me. Mun-Gi wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. He smelled of fresh espresso and contentment. He had changed too. The perpetual tension in his shoulders had unspooled. He had legitimized 90% of the business, leaving the darker dealings to a vetted inner circle. Vetted by me, of course. "She's already running the house," I laughed, leaning my head back against his shoulder. "I heard her firing the chef yesterday because the pancakes weren't fluffy enough. I had to rehire him in the parking lot." A throat cleared behind us. Mr. Sato, a new shipping partner from Tokyo, was standing by the glass doors, looking uncomfortable. He had just signed the contracts for the new logistics route. "Mr. Song," Sato said, bowing slightly. He looked at me, dressed in jeans and a cashmere sweater, barefoot, and then back at Mun-Gi. "A lovely home. And your wife, does she enjoy the quiet life? It must be a change from the excitement of the city." Mun-Gi laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound that made my toes curl. "Quiet?" Mun-Gi tightened his arm around me, dropping a kiss on my temple. "Mr. Sato, do not let the sweater fool you. My wife is more dangerous than I am. I just signed the papers. She is the one who ensures we live to read them." Sato blinked, unsure if it was a joke. I just flashed him a sharp, wolfish smile. He bowed hastily and retreated to the elevator. Mun-Gi turned me around in his arms, his expression turning serious. His thumb grazed my lower lip. "Do you miss it?" he asked softly. "The adrenaline? The noise? The Valkyrie?" I looked down at Sarang, who was now laughing as a bodyguard put a bow on his own head to amuse her. I looked back at Mun-Gi, the man who had driven a car through a wall for me, the man who looked at me like I was the only anchor in his storm. "I have everything I need right here," I whispered. He kissed me then, slow, deep, and possessive, a promise that he would never let me go. I closed my eyes, sinking into the warmth. I came here to heal a child, but I ended up healing the dragon, and for the first time in my life, I don't need to be a ghost. I am home.
Greetings from Bahamas. Very interesting story. Keep it coming. A good narrator. Shalom.